Hello viewers, in this video I wanted to show you something I started doing recently. Basically I'm trying to figure out various methods for aging metal. I'm making these parts for people that are potentially looking for parts for old rifles, and in some cases if I make them pristine they're just not gonna go well with the rifle, right? So here's an example. Here are the charger guides for the Winchester 1895 Russian contract rifle that actually use charger guides. In this video we're going to work on this brand new set of charger guides that I made, and we're going to try and age them quickly, as in maybe over a couple of days. Instead of finishing the parts correctly using, for example, this American rust bluing solution that I use to slow rust my parts, what I'm going to do is basically go against the directions and let my parts rust for a lot longer, because I want to get pitting, right? So I want to get at the same time pitting and finish. In order for me to let the parts rust, I'm going to need to use a sweat box of some sort, or a container in which the parts are going to be exposed to humidity. And I've decided to use just a regular kind of jar. This one is from coffee. I have a lid for it that I drilled a few holes in, and I'm going to suspend these parts from these wires. So the parts have been thoroughly degreased, and I'm going to apply the solution liberally, which is against instructions or directions again. The idea here is that the parts are going to be placed in the jar or suspended from the lid. There will be a little bit of hot water added to the basically bottom of the jar, just to introduce humidity, and then the parts will rust. I added pretty hot water to the jar. Basically I'm getting condensation on the part. I'm going to leave the camera running. By the way, this was about an hour and a half. I decided that after that chances are it's not going to rust anymore. Alright, so here's what we're looking at after I took the parts out and boiled them for a little bit. Not too much, about 5 minutes in just regular water, and you can see that the rust didn't really convert, and it's really dirty basically. So the velvet, there's a lot of velvet on top. So what we're going to do is use a carding brush and get the velvet off the parts. Most important thing here is to get all of the loose rust off the parts, but not take off the finish. Now I'm going to repeat the same process, and I'll show you what they look like in another hour and a half. Instead of waiting an hour and a half, I decided to actually wait overnight. And you can see that the parts have rusted pretty well. The next step is going to be to boil them again, using in regular water. And what you see here is, after I boiled them, I started carding them again. And once again, just like before, the objective here is to get loose rust off of the parts, but leave finish on. And with slow rust bluing, it's not like cold bluing. You get the finish gradually. So don't be bothered by the fact that it looks gray as opposed to black. That's how it's supposed to look with slow rust bluing. I'm going to use a very small ball-peen hammer. I'm going to use both this side and the flat side. of the hammer to beat up these parts. And what we want to do is we want to think about how these parts could be damaged, right? So they're sitting on the receiver, they're protruding out of the receiver. That means that side impact is possible, obviously face impact is possible. These parts on top, the heads, are protruding even more, so heads will get dinged probably a lot more than bottoms. And that's basically what we want to go after. So edges and heads, essentially. Kind of an important note here is to not go overboard with texturing. Less is more in this instance. Don't create too much texture, because too much texture may just not look good. So it's mainly about placement rather than quantity of those dings that you create. The other thing that we can do is use a file and put a couple of cuts into the part. And immediately after I create those scratches, what I do is I follow with a hammer to kind of pin down the edges of those scratches to make sure that there's nothing protruding. And then I'll repeat basically the exact same thing, dinging the part, the edges, damaging the part basically for the other part of the set. You can see using the file, using the hammer, exact same thing. And you can do as little or as much as you need. And again, it's more about what the rifle looks like rather than just creating damaged parts. So what would be preferred, I think, is to do this when you actually see the condition of the receiver. What you see here is that I put my parts onto a paper towel because I'm going to use vinegar, just regular white vinegar, and I spray the parts lightly. The reason they're on the paper towel is so that I just don't spray my mat with vinegar. Now that they've been sprayed, I can move them off of the paper towel. Sorry for the white background, I know it's ruining the lighting of the video. And we'll just let them sit with vinegar on them. So I know the lighting is not great, but hopefully you can see vinegar acts as a rust remover. So, and it etches the metal slightly. So you can see that we've given our parts a beating. We're also removing some of the finish. And generally the parts look pretty beat up. Now using hydrogen peroxide we can add a little bit more rust or patina to the parts. So I'm going to use just a wooden kind of stick just to add hydrogen peroxide in controlled fashion. As I'm sure you can tell, I'm doing kind of a spotty treatment, so not trying to cover the entire part, just the spots. And you'll see in a second that I'll be putting a lot more peroxide onto the sides. The reason why is because sides are most likely not the areas where somebody would rub off rust or add oil. So that's why more on the sides. And now I'm just gonna wipe them off. Alright, so with more light you can now see what they look like. So there's a little bit of patina happening. They are beat up. It all depends kind of on what your rifle or what somebody's rifle may look like, and based on that, appropriate methods need to be chosen on how to age parts to make them fit the rifle a little bit better. But all in all, this set came out pretty decent.